Today, we're exposing 7 of the most popular canned tuna brands in America, and what we found is something most shoppers never see coming. Scientists tested canned tuna pulled directly from regular grocery store shelves. The DNA results showed that some of those cans didn't contain tuna at all. What they found was escolar, a fish banned from sale in Japan and Italy because of how toxic it is to the human body, sitting in cans labeled as tuna on the same shelves you've been shopping from for years. 7 brands went through the full investigation. Only 2 are actually family safe. We're going through all of them right now. Number 7, Genova. This is the premium-looking one, the one sitting slightly above everything else on the shelf in a can that implies it came from somewhere better. The Italian name does something specific the moment you see it. Genova. It sounds like a cobblestone street near the Mediterranean coast. Pair that with olive oil packing and a higher price, and it builds a complete story before you've opened anything. Artisan sourcing. Old world quality. A product worth paying more for. That story is a carefully constructed aesthetic. It's not a sourcing guarantee. Genova is owned by Bolton Food, an Italian corporation with large-scale global seafood processing operations. The Italian ownership is real. The implication that what's inside the can reflects artisan Mediterranean fishing traditions and quality standards that justify the premium price. That's not supported by what the brand actually discloses about its supply chain. The tuna in Genova cans isn't exclusively Italian caught or Italian processed. It moves through the same category of global supply chains built around cost and availability that every other mass-market canned tuna brand uses. The difference is that Genova charges more for the Italian name and the olive oil presentation, while sourcing through networks opaque enough to produce the same species substitution problems documented across this entire category. Independent testing has flagged species and sourcing inconsistencies in premium olive oil-packed tuna lines, so the premium price creates an expectation of verification the supply chain doesn't consistently meet. Then there's the olive oil itself. The specific quality and origin of that oil isn't disclosed anywhere on the label. And olive oil is one of the most extensively documented cases of food adulteration in the global market. Oils sold as olive oil and independently tested have repeatedly been found to contain cheaper vegetable oil blends that never appear on the label. So you're potentially paying a premium for a product built on 2 unverified ingredients, not 1. Pour the oil from a Genova can slowly into a glass before cooking with it. Genuine extra virgin olive oil has a deep golden green color and clings visibly to glass. Oil that pours thin and pale from a can labeled olive oil packed is already telling you something before you take a single bite. You're paying for the Italian coast. You're getting a label engineered to remind you of it. Number 6. Market Pantry. This is the clean-looking Target one. The one that feels like a step above the Walmart store brand because the store around it feels more considered. A shopper paying a little more for Market Pantry over great value is making a reasonable assumption that the price gap reflects a quality gap somewhere in the supply chain. It doesn't. Market Pantry is Target's private label. Target doesn't fish. Target doesn't maintain relationships with named, documented fisheries or run processing facilities. Target designs labels and manages procurement contracts. The product inside that can is produced by whoever won the supply contract for that category at that price point in that procurement cycle, and that can rotate from one quarter to the next. There's no named fishery on Market Pantry tuna. No Marine Stewardship Council certification. No independent third-party species verification disclosed to the consumer. The sourcing information on the label meets the legal minimum required to sell canned tuna in the United States. And as this investigation keeps showing, that minimum tells you almost nothing meaningful about what species is actually inside. Independent research on private label tuna products across major American retailers has consistently found species substitution rates that significantly exceed those found in named branded products, when no independent party is checking what species enters the can between the ocean and your shelf. Substitution risk builds at every single transfer point. Here's the part that matters most. For a shopper in the aisle, the price premium over great value didn't go to supply chain accountability. It went to the design team that made the label look clean enough to justify charging more. That's not what most shoppers think they're paying for. Number 5. Great value tuna. This is the budget one, the one families grab when they're trying to stretch the grocery bill. And tuna is one of the most affordable proteins available. That reasoning is completely sound. The problem is what actually sits behind the Walmart name. Walmart is the largest retail corporation on Earth, but they don't have fishing vessels. They don't employ anyone verifying species at a processing facility before a can is sealed. They have supply contracts, and those contracts go to whoever can deliver product at the lowest cost per unit while meeting the minimum legal threshold required to put a can on an American grocery shelf. That threshold is extraordinarily low. No named fisheries required. No independent species testing. No mercury disclosure beyond what the FDA already mandates across the entire category. And here's something most shoppers don't realize. The manufacturer producing great value tuna this quarter may not be the manufacturer producing it next quarter. The contract rotates on price. When it rotates, the sourcing changes, the facility changes, and the species verification standards of whoever won the latest bid become the effective standards of the can you're currently holding. The label stays identical. Everything behind it can change with zero visible signal to the person buying it. DNA testing on store-brand tuna has consistently produced some of the highest species substitution rates in the entire canned tuna category. The economics explain it directly. Named documented fisheries cost more than anonymous international brokers. Mercury testing above the regulatory minimum costs money. Every one of those costs works against winning the Walmart contract, so they get cut, and the substitution rates in independent testing reflect exactly that. Drain a great value can and hold the liquid up toward a light source. Properly processed single-species tuna runs relatively clear, murky, inconsistently colored brine, where the liquid looks different across different parts of the same can. Reflects what happens when species with different fat contents and different protein structures break down together. The next one has been a pantry staple for over a century. And the story behind who actually owns it changes how the whole thing looks. Number 4. Chicken of the Sea. This is the one that's been in your family's pantry for over 100 years. The mermaid has been on that can since 1914. For a lot of shoppers, especially seniors and families who've been buying the same staples for decades, Chicken of the Sea doesn't register as a brand anymore. It registers as a fixture, something permanent, something safe in the specific way that only deeply familiar things feel safe. That feeling is the product. What's behind it is a very different story. Chicken of the Sea is owned by Thai Union, a Thai corporation that controls approximately 20% of the global canned seafood market. The mermaid stays on the front. Thai Union stays invisible. That arrangement isn't accidental. The Associated Press published a landmark investigative series into Thai Union's fishing vessels and supply chain operations. What reporters documented was forced labor, men trafficked onto fishing boats, and held at sea for months or years at a time without pay, without contracts, and with no way off the vessel. The fish caught under those conditions moved through Thai Union's supply chain and into cans on American grocery shelves. That investigation was awarded the Pulitzer Prize. Thai Union issued public statements, joined international sustainability coalitions, and committed to systemic reform. But independent audits conducted after those initial investigations continued to raise unresolved sourcing concerns. Certifications were obtained. What actually happens on a vessel 200 miles offshore at 30 in the morning is significantly harder to verify than what gets published in a sustainability press release. The scale of Thai Union's tuna operations makes the accountability problem structural. More vessels, more processing facilities spread across multiple countries, more transfer points where species substitution can occur before the fish reaches a can. And when the supply chain is this large and this deliberately opaque, the systems responsible for catching substitution before the can is sealed are the same systems the corporation controls and self-audits. Open a Chicken of the Sea can and look at the liquid before draining it. In a properly processed single-species product, the brine runs consistently clear or very lightly colored throughout. Liquid that's cloudy or visibly inconsistent from one section of the can to another reflects what happens when species with different fat compositions and protein structures are processed together under the same conditions. The mermaid has been smiling through every investigation and every Pulitzer Prize for over a century. She's not smiling for you. She's smiling for Thai Union. If this investigation is already changing how you see the tuna aisle, a quick like helps more people find it. Number 3. Bumblebee Foods. This one completed a criminal triangle. Starkiss pleaded guilty. Chicken of the Sea cooperated with federal investigators. Bumblebee went the furthest of all three. Bumblebee's CEO, Christopher Lishkuski, was convicted at trial in 2019 and sentenced to 40 months in federal prison. Not a settlement, not a deferred prosecution where the company pays a fine and moves on. A jury trial, a guilty verdict. The man running one of the most widely purchased canned tuna brands in America was found criminally guilty of conspiracy to fix prices and sent to prison for it. Bumblebee filed for bankruptcy the same year. The company restructured under new private equity ownership, emerged with updated messaging, refreshed packaging, and public commitments to sustainability and sourcing transparency. Here's the honest test for whether a company that restructured after a criminal conviction has genuinely changed anything that matters. Look at what's verifiably different about how the product is sourced, tested, and independently verified. Not the press release, not the new logo, the actual supply chain. Bumblebee post-restructuring still doesn't carry independent third-party species verification across its standard product lines. There's still no named fishery on the standard label. There's still no audit trail a consumer can follow from a specific ocean location to the specific can in the grocery aisle. The sourcing accountability that was absent before the criminal proceedings is structurally absent after the bankruptcy filing and the private equity acquisition. What changed was the ownership. The opacity didn't change with it. Independent testing on Bumblebee products since restructuring has continued to surface the same categories of concern: mercury-level inconsistencies across product lines. Species verification questions the company doesn't volunteer to address. That means the problems aren't tied to who ran the company. They're tied to how the supply chain is built. Open a can of Bumblebee solid white albacore and break the fish apart with a fork. Real solid white albacore has a consistent grain-firm muscle fiber running in a clear uniform direction throughout the entire can. When the texture shifts unexpectedly within the same can, when color varies from one section to another, when some pieces hold firm while others dissolve in a way that doesn't reflect one species under one set of conditions, the fish is telling you something the label is not. 40 months in federal prison for the CEO, 0 verifiable changes to what's inside the can. Number 2. StarKist. This is the one with Charlie, the cartoon fish who's been trying to get into a StarKist can since 1961. Generations of American families grew up watching that mascot and bought StarKist. Their kids bought StarKist. Their grandchildren are pulling those yellow cans off shelves today without a second thought. Because when something's been in your family that long, you stop questioning it. Charlie never mentioned the federal criminal record. StarKist, Bumblebee, and Chicken of the Sea, the 3 dominant brands in the category, the ones running ads against each other and competing for your grocery dollar, were secretly coordinating prices behind closed doors. It didn't matter which can you grabbed. The price had already been decided for you without your knowledge in violation of federal antitrust law. The Department of Justice investigated. StarKist pleaded guilty to federal price-fixing charges in 2019 and was fined $100 million. Charlie kept smiling on the front of the can, but the sourcing problems go deeper than the price-fixing. Independent DNA testing conducted by ocean conservation researchers flagged species substitution across StarKist product lines. Cans labeled as albacore found to contain skipjack. Cans labeled as light tuna found to contain species that DNA sequencing couldn't identify as tuna at all. DNA sequencing doesn't lie about what's in the sample. The label sometimes does. And that's the part that matters when you're choosing what to buy. Then there's mercury. Certain StarKist varieties have tested above FDA advisory thresholds for mercury in independent laboratory analysis. Those thresholds exist because mercury doesn't pass through the body cleanly. It accumulates over time. It crosses the placental barrier. It directly affects neurological development in fetuses and young children. The population most at risk, pregnant women and families with small children, is the same population that's been eating StarKist as an affordable health-conscious protein for decades. Press a fork against the fish in an open can of StarKist Chunk Light. A single species product behaves consistently under pressure throughout the entire can. What you find in some StarKist cans is different. Sections that hold firm sitting directly next to sections that dissolve almost immediately. That inconsistency within a single can isn't natural variation within one species. That's what it looks like when multiple species with different tissue densities are processed and packed together. $100 million fine. A federal criminal plea. DNA flags on the species. mercury above advisory thresholds. And Charlie is still smiling. Number 1. Safe Catch Elite. This is the hardest one to place at the top of this list, and it needs to be here for a reason that's completely different from every other brand in this investigation. Safe Catch built its entire brand identity around a promise no other canned tuna company was willing to make. Every individual fish mercury tested before it goes into a can, not batch tested where a sample from a lot is checked and the rest assumed to match. Every single fish the brand markets directly to pregnant women and cancer patients. The exact populations for whom mercury exposure isn't an abstract long-term risk, but a specific, immediate, and serious medical concern. That mercury testing promise is real. It's independently verifiable. It's the most meaningful consumer safety commitment in the entire canned tuna category, and it deserves to be recognized as exactly that. Safe Catch is number 1 on this list for an entirely different category of problem. Safe Catch's health positioning around the mercury promise has been so effective that a significant portion of its consumer base has stopped reading the rest of the label. A pregnant woman buying Safe Catch because she trusts the mercury commitment is making a reasonable decision, but that trust has migrated across the entire product without scrutiny. She bought the mercury promise and assumed everything else behind the label met the same standard of care. That assumption is where the problem lives. Sodium. Sodium levels in certain Safe Catch varieties run meaningfully higher than the health food positioning of the brand implies. For pregnant women managing blood pressure and fluid retention, sodium isn't a secondary concern. It's a primary one. For cancer patients managing treatment side effects that include hypertension and cardiovascular strain, the sodium content of a product they believe was specifically designed for their health needs is a material fact, not a footnote buried in fine print. The information is on the label. It's technically disclosed. But the marketing doesn't lead with it, doesn't emphasize it, and doesn't present it with anything close to the prominence of the mercury claim that drives the purchasing decision. Brine formulations used in several Safe Catch processing lines have raised questions among independent nutritional researchers about cumulative sodium exposure for consumers eating this product regularly, which the brand specifically encourages because the mercury testing supports frequent consumption for the exact populations most concerned about mercury. Here's where the compounding problem becomes serious. The core marketing message is, eat this regularly because the mercury is tested and safe. For pregnant women and cancer patients following that guidance, regular consumption of an elevated sodium product creates a health exposure the mercury-focused messaging never once addresses. Genuine trust earned through one real safety commitment doesn't automatically extend to every other dimension of the product. But Safe Catch's positioning actively encourages consumers to assume that it does. Safe Catch also carries a meaningful price premium. Health-vulnerable consumers pay that premium willingly precisely because this brand has earned their confidence through the mercury commitment. Earned trust at a premium price creates a specific obligation. Full transparency across every dimension of the nutritional profile, not just the single metric that drives the purchase. And that's the gap. Before you open a can of Safe Catch Elite, read the complete label, not just the mercury claim on the back. The promise they kept is real. The promises they never made are where the gap lives. And for the people buying this product, that gap matters most. 2 brands made it through clean. No criminal history. No sourcing gaps. No label that turned out to be a lie. Here's what's actually worth buying. Best option number 2, American tuna. This one is exactly what it says it is. American albacore caught off the United States Pacific coast by American fishing families who've worked those specific waters for generations, processed in American facilities operating under domestic regulatory oversight. The supply chain doesn't pass through Thai Union. It doesn't touch the bumblebee restructuring. It doesn't move through any of the opaque international processing networks where species substitution becomes possible at every handoff. The supply chain is the simplest in the entire canned tuna category, and that simplicity is the point. American boats catch Pacific Coast albacore in verified documented fishing grounds. That fish goes directly to processing without a multi-country journey through brokers, transit facilities, and third-party processors where accountability disappears at every transfer. Full traceability from a specific ocean region to a specific can is built into the model because the model was designed around accountability, not volume. Family-owned, never acquired by a multinational seafood conglomerate, never absorbed into a corporate portfolio where sourcing decisions get made by procurement teams optimizing for margin. The families behind American tuna have their names and livelihoods directly attached to the quality of every can that ships. That accountability is structural. It doesn't vanish after a bankruptcy filing or private equity acquisition because neither of those things has happened. Independent species verification confirms what the label states. Mercury levels in Pacific Coast albacore test consistently within safe ranges. Sodium levels are honest. The ingredient panel is short enough to read in 10 seconds. American tuna isn't on every grocery shelf. It's available online and through specialty retailers. It costs more than every brand on the skip list. That cost is the domestic fishing, the family ownership, and the supply chain integrity that begins and ends in American waters. If you can find it, it's worth it. And if you want the single strongest option in the entire category, here it is. Best option number 1. Wild Planet Tuna. This brand wasn't built as a premium line extension of an existing seafood conglomerate. It was built from the ground up as a direct rejection of everything wrong with how this category operates. That founding intention isn't marketing copy, it's visible in every verifiable detail behind the product. The tuna is pole and line caught. That matters more than it might initially sound. Pole and line is the most selective commercial fishing method available. One fish is caught at a time. There's no net dragging unintended species into the same catch volume alongside the target fish. No bycatch mixing species that were never supposed to be in the can. The method is slower, more expensive, and less scalable than industrial net fishing. That's precisely why every other brand in this investigation doesn't use it. The fisheries are named. The catch regions are documented. There's a paper trail connecting a specific area of ocean to the specific can in your hand because the supply chain was built around traceability, not volume. Non-GMO verified, no added water inflating the apparent weight of the fish and artificially boosting the protein number on the label. No broth. No fillers. Ingredient panel on Wild Planet albacore tuna reads, albacore tuna, sea salt. 2 ingredients. Every other brand in this investigation requires significantly more to approximate what a properly sourced, honestly processed can of tuna should simply be. Species verified through independent third-party DNA testing. The label says albacore. The testing confirms albacore. That should be a baseline standard across the entire category, and in the context of everything this investigation uncovered, it's rare enough to be a genuine differentiator between a brand you can trust and one you can't. Mercury tested with results disclosed. BPA-free can lining across the entire product line. 0 recalls since the brand was founded. Open a can of Wild Planet albacore and break the fish apart with a fork. It holds firm, consistent grain, clear muscle fiber running in a uniform direction throughout the entire can. It smells clean and genuinely oceanic. Not processed flat, not chemically muted, not like multiple species were combined in the same facility and pressed into the same shape. That's what a single verified species, pole and line cod, processed without fillers or added water, actually looks and smells like. The difference is noticeable the first time you open one. Wild Planet costs more than Starkist, more than Bumblebee, more than every store brand in the tuna aisle. That cost is the pole and line fishing, the named fisheries, the independent testing, and the refusal to substitute a cheaper species when the target catch runs short. You're not paying for a label that implies quality. You're paying for a supply chain built to deliver it. 7 brands, 2 that held up. You chose canned tuna because the logic was sound. Low mercury when sourced correctly. High in omega-3s. Accessible nutrition that pregnant women, athletes, people in cancer treatment, and families on tight grocery budgets have all been counting on for decades. That logic is still sound. It only holds when what's inside the can matches what's printed on the outside. Several of the biggest names in this category have federal criminal convictions. Another is owned by a corporation connected to a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigation into forced labor at sea. Multiple brands have been flagged for species substitution through DNA testing, meaning the fish in the can isn't the fish named on the label, and the store brands sitting under the most powerful retail names in America are running supply chains so anonymous that nobody, including the retailers selling them, can tell you with certainty what species went into the can. you just put in your cart. Now you know which ones, and you know the two that earned every word on their labels. Next time you're standing in the tuna aisle, flip the can over. Look for a named fishery. Look for independent species verification with disclosed results, not implied quality language. Look for mercury testing that goes beyond the regulatory minimum. If the sourcing information on the back is vaguer than the branding on the front, put it back on the shelf. Share this with anyone you know who's eating canned tuna for their health right now. They're reaching for these brands without knowing any of this. The can looks exactly the same as it always has. What's behind it has never been less certain.